The first time Ruth saw him, he was a silhouette slumped against her threshold, the baby swaddled to his chest with what looked like an old duster coat, the ends knotted tight across his back. He didn't stir when she unlatched the door, just breathed slow and shallow, like someone already halfway gone. Snow muffled everything. The wind clawed sideways at her porch rafters, a hungry thing. She stepped out barefoot, the heat of the hearth clinging to her soles until it didn't. Her lantern cast a pale glow across the man's face, jaw slack from sleep or pain, the sharp stubble lining his chin dusted white with frost. The baby made no sound, just a tremble under cloth. Ruth didn't ask questions. She took the child first. Inside, the house was cold despite the stove. She stoked it with a kindling burst and sat the infant down on the worn horsehair cushion beside the iron, fingers fumbling at the knots. The swaddle peeled back to a red, pinched face, eyes sealed tight. No cries, just small, bird-like breaths. A girl. She returned for the man, hauled him up by his coat collar, half dragging, half coaxing. He was heavier than he looked, all soaked wool and lean, roped muscle. Inside, she let him collapse near the stove. One of his boots was half torn, the toes black beneath. By dawn, he'd kicked into fever, body arching like he was trying to outrun whatever chased him through sleep. Ruth wiped him down with vinegar and rainwater, steadied his jaw when it clenched, fed the baby goat's milk through a rag. Neither of them spoke a word for 3 days. He woke with a rasp that didn't quite form her name. He didn't know it, but it curled toward her all the same. She was squatting by the stove, shelling beans. "You're in my house," she said without looking up. The man blinked like the light hurt. He tried to sit up but flinched at his side. "I didn't mean to come here," he said. "You did, you just don't remember it." He looked around, took in the patched curtains, the spade lined by the door, the tin of beans steaming on the coals. His eyes landed on the baby bundled in her sling, pressed against Ruth's front like something the earth gave her. "She yours now?" he asked. "No," she said, "not yet." He tried to stand again. Ruth didn't stop him, but the pain folded him in half. He grunted, pressing one hand to his ribs. His knuckles were split. Dried blood made a crust down his wrist. "Where were you going?" she asked. The man shook his head. "Didn't have a place in mind, just somewhere not where I was." "Where was that?" He didn't answer. "Name?" "Jonas." "That her name?" Ruth gestured to the child. He hesitated. "Ren." Ruth nodded once, satisfied. She can stay. He looked at her then, really looked. Her face was hard, mouth a straight line carved by habit, but she didn't look unkind, just emptied out in the ways most women got after too many years alone. "I don't have anything to give," he said. "Not for room, not for food." "You're warm-blooded and you've got 2 arms." She stood. "I need fence work done and seed sacks hauled. Come spring, there'll be calves to pull." "You don't even know what I did." "I don't care," she said, too sharp. "You came with a baby and frostbite, that's what I know." Outside, the wind died by mid-morning. The snow stopped piling. Ruth let him rest that whole first week, though she worked like she always did, milking, chopping, mending. She moved quiet around him. Didn't ask what happened to Wren's mother, though the question hung between them every time the baby cried and he startled awake like it tore him in half. He talked little, she didn't push, but slowly the rhythm of him joined hers. He split logs in the mornings, dug out the frozen posts from the hog pen. Ruth taught him how to dress a wound on a calf's hock and how to stretch lard for baking. He could stitch decently, though his fingers shook. She didn't ask why. By February, he was sleeping on a cot in the corner by the stove. Wren stayed in Ruth's room because the heat held better there and Jonas still had nightmares. Once, Ruth found him curled by the door again, same way he'd been that first night, though the house had gone silent hours earlier. He didn't stir as she stepped past. He started calling her Miss Ruth, like he couldn't let himself forget it wasn't his home. She didn't correct him. One morning she found him holding Wren against his chest, singing something low, nearly a whisper. A hymn maybe. His eyes were closed. He didn't see her watching. There was something raw in his face then, like he'd been peeled down to whatever he once was before all of it went bad. Ruth turned away before he noticed. She wasn't used to men looking like that, not after everything, not after Sela's. She hadn't said her husband's name aloud in 5 years, not since they pulled him from the well. By early March, the snow broke, the creek behind the field gurgled loose. Ruth hitched the mule and drove out to the old fence line, Jonas walking ahead, shoulders hunched under the coil of barbed wire. He didn't ask where her people were. She didn't ask why he flinched every time the hawks called overhead. One night after Wren finally cried herself to sleep, Ruth found Jonas outside splitting wood under the moon. He wasn't wearing gloves. His fingers were red and raw. "You're working too late," she said. "He didn't stop. Helps me sleep." She stepped closer. "You never sleep, not really." He didn't deny it, just drove the axe down harder like it might quiet whatever screamed inside him. "You can stay," she said, "if that's what you're trying to earn." He turned, sweat froze on his temples. "You and Wren, I don't need the help," she lied, "but I don't want to see that girl starve." He looked at her for a long time, and me. "I reckon she needs you more than she knows yet." He nodded once, then twice. The axe hung limp at his side. "I won't run again," he said. Ruth didn't ask what he'd run from. She just said, "Good," then turned back inside. Neither of them saw the man on the ridge that night, watching with a glass eye and a borrowed horse, holding a grudge carved deeper than bone. The thaw brought more than mud. It brought hoofprints where there shouldn't be any by the north fence, pressed deep where the frost had loosened the earth. Ruth found them first, the morning after a sick ewe had gone missing. The prints were sharp, recent, a big gelding by the look of it, wide set, shod but worn down. She didn't tell Jonas, not at first. He'd been quieter lately, but not from the cold. Something else had settled over him. The way he scanned the horizon at dusk. The way he sat with Wren longer than he needed to, whispering things against her temple like secrets might guard her better than locks. That night Ruth didn't sleep. She stayed by the stove with the rifle across her lap, her boots still laced. The wind scratched under the door, but nothing came. No hooves, no voices, just that creeping sense like the woods were holding their breath. By April, the creek had flooded its banks. Jonas built up stone along the root cellar to keep the water out. Wren was crawling now, fast as a spider, all limbs and spit. Ruth started leaving her wrapped in quilts on the porch when she worked the fields. Jonas stayed close, patching fence or digging out the stumps by the back acre. He didn't talk much about before, but one evening, as they were boiling down maple sap in the yard, he stood quiet for so long Ruth thought he'd fallen asleep standing up. "She bled fast," he said finally. Ruth didn't turn, just stirred the kettle once, twice. "We were crossing the river. My horse slipped on shale. He swallowed. Ellen, that was her name. She hit her head on a rock, died before I could pull her out." Ruth kept her eyes on the sap, and the baby. She floated down to me, still in the wrap. He looked at his hands like they were someone else. I thought that was a mercy, then I hated God for it. "You still believe in him?" He shook his head. "Not since that morning, not really." They stood there while the steam rose in ribbons around them, smelling of bark and slow sugar. Ruth didn't offer comfort. She buried too many names for that. A week later, she found the chicken coop busted open. One hen dead, the others scattered into the brush. Wire pulled apart by hand, not beast, and under the nesting box, a boot print, same worn tread, same wide set. This time, she told Jonas. He went still, hands braced on the back of the kitchen chair. Wren was on the floor, babbling to her toes. Could have been a drifter, Ruth said, but they don't gut hens and not take them. Jonas didn't answer. She watched him, you know who it might be. He nodded once, jaw tight. I'll say it. His name's Burl, used to ride with a man I worked for Denton Webb. Denton got himself strung up after a cattle rustle turned bad. Burl took it personal. How personal? I was supposed to be with them that night. Ellen begged me not to go. She said she had a feeling, so I stayed. And Denton hanged. Jonas nodded again. Burl thinks I betrayed him, thinks I sold him out. Did you? No, he looked up, eyes flat. But I should have. That night they moved the cot closer to the front door. Ruth loaded the rifle and the pistol both, laid the hatchet near the baby's cradle. She lived through worse men. She wasn't about to be undone by one who couldn't finish what he started. 2 days passed quiet. On the third, the smoke came. Ruth spotted it just before dusk, a black curl behind the trees north of the pasture near the old cabin ruins. She mounted the mule. Jonas followed, shotgun slung over his back. They found what was left of her smokehouse burned clean, fat sizzling in the ashes. No tracks, just that same old boot print in the mud behind it, deep and deliberate. He's warning you, Jonas said. Ruth stared at the ashes. No, he's warning you. Jonas's voice dropped. Then we don't wait, we go first. Ruth turned toward him. He had a look in his eyes then, something hard, almost calm. Not the man she pulled in half dead from the snow, something colder, older. You sure about that? She asked. He nodded. They planned it simple. Ruth had a cousin, Wayland, who lived 2 days east near the Cut River. Trapper, half mad, but he knew everyone who moved through that country. If Burl had a camp, Wayland would know. They packed light. Ruth, Jonas, Wren slung in the wrap again. She wore her husband's revolver. Jonas carried the rifle. The nights were still bitter, but the road had dried. They moved quiet, taking deer trails where they could. The second night they heard the whistle, a long, thin cry in the trees behind them. Jonas stopped mid-step. Wren stirred but didn't wake. That's his sign, he said. Used to call it the widow's tune. He's following us. No, Jonas said. He's driving us somewhere. Wayland's cabin sat in a fold of pine above a stone gorge. The roof caved at one edge, but smoke still rising from the chimney. He met them at the door, rifle in hand, eyes rheumy and sharp. Well, I'll be, he said, if it ain't the woman with the burned-down smokehouse and the man with a bounty on his head. Jonas tensed. Ruth stepped between them. We need names, movements. You seen Burl. Wayland grinned without humor. Saw him 4 days back, riding with 2 boys, one missing a hand. They asked where you was. What do you say? Lied. Why? He squinted at Wren, then Ruth. Figured you had your reasons, and the girl don't deserve a bullet. They camped inside. Ruth kept watch while Jonas slept with the baby curled into his chest. Just before dawn, Wayland tapped her shoulder. He ain't going to stop, you know, he said. Burl's got that kind of hate in him, deep like rot. You run, he follows. You hide, he burns it down. So what do you suggest? Wayland spat into the fire. You draw him out, take him somewhere empty, and make sure he don't walk away. Ruth stared into the flames. Her jaw ached from clenching. You willing to kill him? He asked. I'm willing to bury him. She meant it. The next morning they left Wren with Wayland. Jonas protested, but Ruth fixed him with a look. We do this clean, she said. She don't see none of it. They rode south toward the gorge. An old quarry lay there, abandoned since the last mine collapse. Nothing for miles, no witnesses, just shale and wind and the ghosts of crushed men. Ruth staked a red scarf to the bluff edge. A lure. Then they waited. They didn't speak much, just watched the sun burn low, the shadows stretch. When the first shot came, it cracked the silence clean through. Jonas ducked. Ruth rolled to cover, sighting down the ridge. She saw him then burl, face thin as a blade, one eye glassy, riding a paint horse like war was in his blood. He shouted something, but the wind stole it. Then he fired again. Ruth didn't flinch. She returned fire once, twice. Jonas moved to flank, circling behind the quarry ledge. Burl dismounted, started stalking forward, slow and certain, like he'd done this before and liked it. He didn't see Jonas come up behind. The crack of the rifle sent birds scattering. Burl dropped to one knee, howling. "Don't kill him," Ruth shouted. Jonas hesitated, breathing hard. "Let me finish it," she said. She walked up slow, boots crunching shale. Burl clutched his side, blood soaking through, his good eye locked on her. "You're nobody," he spat. "I'm the one who took him in, gave him a reason to live." Burl laughed, bitter and wet. "He ain't worth saving." "No," Ruth said, "but she is." Then she raised her revolver and shot him once, clean through the head. Jonas stared at the body for a long time. "Is it done?" he asked. "No," she said, "but it started." They buried Burl in the quarry where he fell. No prayer, no stone, just a hole cut shallow into shale, filled with what he'd become. Jonas stood back while Ruth shoveled the last of the dirt, her face set, movements spare. It had rained that morning, and the red earth clung to their boots like it wanted something more. Wayland didn't ask what happened when they returned. He handed Wren back without a word, the girl wide-eyed and warm from sleep. Jonas held her like something fragile, his face unreadable. "She's getting teeth," Wayland muttered. "Chewed half my damn shirt." Ruth nodded, but her mind wasn't on the baby. It was on what came after. Killing a man, even one like Burl, never ended things. It turned the wheel. Blood called to blood. There be others, sooner or later. If Burl had left word, if he'd carried letters or names in his coat, and he had, Ruth found them, then they weren't finished. The note was folded in waxed cloth, 3 lines. "Jonas fled east. I'll find him. When I do, I'll leave no mouth to speak his name." Signed LM, initials Ruth didn't recognize. Not yet. Jonas knew. He read it once and went pale. "Lorne Marrow," he said. "Denton's cousin, meaner than him and quieter." "Is he coming?" "Not yet, but he will." Ruth burned the letter in Wayland's hearth, watched it blacken and curl. They left before dawn, heading north this time, up into the cold hills where Ruth's mother had kept a trapline before she died. No one lived there now, not for miles. The cabin had rotted, but the stone foundation still held, and the creek beside it ran fast and sweet. Jonas fixed the roof with canvas and pitch. Ruth cleaned out the cellar. They hung strips of venison, smoked over mesquite Jonas gathered from the ridges. Wren learned to stand there, toes dug into bare dirt. She laughed when the birds came down, reaching out like she could pull the sky from them. Jonas kept watch at night. Sometimes Ruth would wake to find him pacing outside, rifle in hand, jaw tight like he was chewing regret. He never went far, but he never really slept either. She understood. Grief had shaped her once too. It made you silent, made you mean, and it didn't let go just because you killed the thing that hurt you. Summer came fast in the high country. The flies thickened, the meat spoiled quicker. Ruth carved new beams for the porch. Jonas taught her how to snare rabbit with wire. They didn't speak about what they'd done, not aloud, but it hung in the air between them, heavy as heat. One night, Ruth found him by the creek, crouched over a fireless circle of stones. He didn't move when she stepped up. "Why'd you come to my door?" she asked. Jonas didn't answer at first. Then, quiet, "I wanted to die somewhere kind." She didn't know what to say to that. "You were supposed to turn me away," he went on, "or call the marshal, or shoot me where I lay." "You had a baby in your arms," she said. He looked at her, "And now I've got your life wrapped up in mine. Maybe I gave it willingly." He didn't speak again, but that night he slept beside the door without the rifle. In September, the news came. A rider passed through the valley, young, dumb, reeking of whiskey. He stopped to trade jerky for a sharpening stone, said there'd been a shooting outside Carson Pass. A man killed, the others ran, left behind a trail of blood and a name burned into the sheriff's barn wall. "Jonas Albright, I am coming." "Lorne." Jonas stood over the fire that night, hands clenched at his sides. "I won't put her in danger again," he said. Ruth was cleaning fish by the porch. "You already did, she's still here." "I can ride out, draw him away." "No." He turned to her. "I'm not afraid to die." "Then stop acting like it's a favor to leave." That stopped him. She gutted the last fish, cleaned the blade. "You think she won't remember, that she won't wake up 30 years from now wondering why her father ran again? Stay, fight, or die right here where she can bury you proper." Jonas nodded, slow, sat down in the dirt like the weight of it finally bent his knees. 3 days later, they found a trap sprung by the edge of the tree line. Inside was a bird, not a rabbit, not game. A hawk caught by the foot, wing torn, still alive, still furious. Jonas moved to kill it, but Ruth stopped him. "We don't bury omens," she said. "We mend them." They splinted the wing, fed it, kept it in a box lined with straw and bits of cloth. It pecked at them, never docile. Ruth liked it for that. Jonas watched her with it one evening, Wren sleeping on her back. "You think it'll live?" "If it wants to," she said. The hawk healed slow, but it healed. So did Jonas. He started singing again, not often, not for long, but sometimes he'd hum to Wren, soft and low, while she twisted in the grass. Ruth never asked what the songs meant, she just listened. One night he kissed her. It was brief, barely a brush, the ghost of something unsure, but Ruth didn't stop him. She didn't kiss him back, not yet, but she didn't step away either. She let the silence after stretch long. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not sending me back into the dark." Ruth didn't say it, but the truth sat behind her teeth. She was the dark, and he'd come anyway. The first snow came early that year. October barely clawed past its middle when the storm blew in, stacking white across the slope and sealing the trails like shut mouths. The creek froze shallow. The hawk, nearly mended now, took to pacing the rafters with a bitter sort of patience, its bad wing tucked close. Wren clapped at it from the floor, laughing. Jonas built a chimney trap to keep smoke from showing above the tree line. Ruth redoubled the hunting traps. Game was scarce, lean. Every kill had to count. They lived tight in those weeks. Firewood dwindled, food stretched thin, but it wasn't the cold or the hunger that tightened Ruth's stomach. It was the way Jonas kept checking the horizon, as if expecting hoofbeats to split the snow at any moment. It was the feeling that something had shifted, that Lorne Marrow wasn't following anymore. He was circling. They stayed close to the cabin, but one morning Ruth found boot prints, 2 sets, melted partway in the thaw, but still fresh enough to raise the hairs on her neck. She followed them westward until they vanished over stone. She said nothing when she returned. But that night, she sharpened every blade in the house and laid them out on the table like a prayer. Jonas said little. He had that quiet, hunched stillness to him again, the same he'd worn when she first found him. Not fear, something deeper. Shame mixed with a kind of calm. "We can run," Ruth offered. "No," he said. "That's the one thing I won't do again." He was making something then, had been in secret for days. A box, long and low, shaped like a cradle but thicker, lined with hide and scraps of wool. "For her," he said when Ruth looked at it. "To carry. To hide." It gutted her. The thought of Wren curled inside, alone, silent. She nodded anyway. They kept watches again. Ruth took the dusk, Jonas the deep hours. The hawk, nearly full-winged now, would perch on the sill at night, eyes hunting. Then came the tracks. 5 men, 3 horses, one with a limp, judging by the drag mark in the snow. Ruth saw them just past dawn, etched sharp and fresh below the south bluff. They returned to the cabin, bolted the doors. The cellar trap had been reset weeks ago, filled with grain sacks, jerky, a pistol. Wren's cradle box was set beside it, stocked with cloth and boiled water. "Are you ready?" Ruth asked. Jonas looked at her, really looked. "I've never been ready for anything, but I'm staying." They didn't wait. Jonas rode out at dusk. Ruth watched from the porch, Wren asleep against her shoulder. His figure vanished between trees, rifle strapped to his back, a satchel tied to the saddle. Bait. He'd gone less than an hour when the shot rang out. Ruth didn't flinch. She placed Wren in the box, kissed her forehead once, and closed the lid. "Don't make a sound, little bird," she whispered. Then she went into the woods. The snow had a sound to it that night, creaked and whispered like bones shifting underground. Ruth moved low, fast, 1 revolver, 2 knives, and a hatchet she'd notched herself last spring. She found the first man slumped against a pine, throat opened clean. Jonas's work. Blood soaked the tree behind him like something growing upward. 2 more dead at the ridge, curled into snowdrifts. The third was still breathing, legs snapped, groaning into his coat. She left him. The last was Lorne. He had Jonas, had him pinned near the shale cut, knife drawn, rifle kicked away. Jonas was bleeding from the temple, one eye swollen shut. Lorne was talking, slow and even. Ruth heard every word. "You took what was mine," Lorne said. "You broke the order, left us to swing while you bred into comfort, built a life on our bones." Jonas spat blood. "Burl burned a smokehouse. What you do? Carve my name into a goddamn sheriff's barn." "I branded you." "You branded a man already marked." Lorne raised the knife. That was when Ruth struck. The hatchet sank into Lorne's shoulder before he even heard her. He howled, staggered. She didn't let him fall. She drove him down, blade drawn free, plunged it into his thigh. He rolled, kicked, caught her off balance. They struggled in the snow, breath clouding like smoke. Jonas tried to rise, fell back. Lorne found his knife again. Ruth saw it flash, knew the angle, knew the weight behind a blade like that. She moved first. The second knife she carried was smaller, meant for skinning. It slipped under Lorne's ribs, up into the hollow just below the heart. He gasped, stared at her. "You ain't his woman," he rasped. "No," she said, "I'm her mother." Then twisted. Lorne died with his eyes open, confusion still in them. Jonas crawled to her, hands shaking. Blood soaked the snow around them. "I should have done it," he said. "No," Ruth answered. "You kept her safe. That's the only thing that matters." They burned the bodies at the bluff. Let the fire light the snow red, let the smoke carry the last of that old life away. When they returned, Wren was asleep still, quiet in her box, fingers curled into fists. The hawk watched from the rafters, head cocked, as if it knew the air had changed. Ruth didn't sleep that night. She sat beside the door, the rifle across her knees, the baby in her lap. Jonas lit a fire, said nothing, just watched the flames rise and fall. The storm outside had passed. But inside, something steadier had taken root. The next spring came soft. Not gentle, not in the way the world meant gentle, but soft like something healed over. The snow pulled back from the roots. The creek ran clear again. Birds returned to the black pines, calling sharp and full-throated. Ruth woke one morning to find Wren standing in the doorway, holding the hawk in both hands, giggling. "She's flying," Wren said, voice sticky with sleep. The bird flapped once, flustered but strong. It caught the air and climbed, circling once over the cabin before vanishing toward the ridge. Jonas stepped onto the porch and stood beside Ruth, watching. "She stayed longer than I expected," he said. "Sometimes the broken ones do," Ruth answered. They buried their weapons beneath the ash tree by the creek, sealed in oilcloth, wrapped in a rusted bit of iron gate. Not because they believed the danger was gone, but because the danger was no longer the point. Wren grew fast that year. She ran before she could say most words, climbed the barn roof before she understood falling. She spoke to the trees like they answered. Ruth let her. If they whispered something back, so be it. Jonas built a smokehouse from stone, taught Wren how to dry meat, how to slice thin and even. Ruth planted potatoes, then squash. She carved new handles for the scythe and the drawknife. Their days filled themselves. And the silence, once sharp and watchful, softened too. Jonas spoke more now, though never much. Sometimes Ruth caught him reading from a water-stained book he'd salvaged from a trapper, abandoned lean-to. He'd read it out loud to Wren in the evenings, letting the words fill the room like honey. Ruth listened from her corner, mending or whittling, never interrupting. There were nights when the past came crawling. She felt it in her bones in the way the wind turned just before dark. Some scars don't fade, they throb in weather, they speak in dreams. One night she woke sweating, hand clenched tight around the knife she hadn't meant to grab. Jonas was already sitting up, watching her. "You were somewhere else," he said. "I was back in the well," she murmured, "the day they dragged Silas out." Jonas didn't speak. "I waited 3 days before I told anyone he'd gone down there," she said, voice dry. I knew what I'd done." "You pushed him." "No," she said, "but I left the rope cut, I let it fray." The silence stretched between them. "I thought it would ruin me, carrying that." Jonas reached across the space, slow. He touched her wrist, light as ash. "We all leave something frayed behind," he said, "but you came back from it." She didn't cry. Ruth didn't believe in tears after grief, only in the things that rose after. That summer Wren turned 3. They marked it by planting an apple tree in the south field. The girl patted dirt over the roots with her bare feet, giggling at the worms. Ruth pressed a silver coin beneath the roots, a blessing, a ward, something old. A month later, a rider came. He didn't wear a badge, just dust and road, and a look that said he'd buried more friends than he could count. Ruth met him with her palms visible, Jonas standing just behind, the rifle within reach. "I'm not here for trouble," the rider said. "Name, Boone, used to ride with Denton, long time ago." They said nothing. "I heard what happened, to Burl, to Lorne, words out that you cleaned house up here." Still they didn't speak. Boone shifted in his saddle. "I came to say thank you, and to tell you there ain't nobody left riding under that name anymore. Denton's gone, his whole line gone with him." Ruth nodded once. Then let it stay that way. Boone touched his hat. Fair enough. He turned to ride out, then paused. She yours? He asked, nodding toward Wren, who stood in the doorway watching. Jonas looked at Ruth. Ruth looked at Wren. She's her own, Ruth said, but she belongs here. Boone smiled, sad and tired. That's enough. He rode on. They never saw him again. The years that followed didn't ask much of them, and for that Ruth was grateful. There were storms, lean winters, a fire that nearly took the barn, but no more men with knives, no more graves dug in haste. Wren grew quiet, strong, like the land that raised her. She asked once who her mother was. Jonas told her she had her eyes. Ruth told her she had her fire, and that was enough. Sometimes at dusk, Ruth would sit on the porch and watch the tree line. She never saw another figure, but she liked knowing she could, that she'd earned the right to wait without fear. Jonas never left again. He built Wren a swing from the ash tree, carved her initials into the beam, then Ruth's, then his own. She watched him do it, her face unreadable. "You think it's safe to mark things?" she asked. He looked up at her. "I do now." Ruth didn't reply, but she stayed, and that was answer enough. The hawk returned once, 3 winters later, landed on the cabin roof, just long enough for Wren to spot it. Then it was gone again, into the cold sky. "Where do you think it goes?" she asked. "Anywhere it wants," Ruth said, "but it knows how to come home." That night Ruth sat by the fire with Wren curled against her shoulder and Jonas beside her, quiet. The wind rattled the shutters, but it was only wind now, nothing more. The cabin held. The girl slept. And Ruth, once alone with only the ghosts of men who hurt her, now watched the flames rise slow and sure, no longer needing to remember how the world burned, only that she had outlived it.